I would just like to introduce myself. I'm Amanda Martin. I'm the Assistant Director of Community Engaged Learning here at Drake. And on behalf of our office and Professional and Career Development Services, we are excited to welcome you to this event. And thank you so much to our panelists as well who are here telling us more today also. So the Pathways for Civic Action and Social Change is a framework that helps us understand various paths for getting involved in service, community, and social change activities. And I'm going to share a link here in the chat box. So if you want to learn more about the pathways, then feel free to do a little bit of reading up on your own. We are fortunate to be joined this evening by Renee Sedlacek-Lee, Director of Community Engaged Learning here at Drake, Justin Ellis, Interim Director of Iowa and Minnesota Campus Compact, and Lindy Buckingham-Schutt, Associate Director of Wellness and Nutrition Policy at the Harkin Institute for Public Policy and Citizen Engagement. So a few housekeeping things as we get started here. We are all social distancing, so you may hear some things in the background, family, pets, other home noises. To help with that and just our network capacity, we ask that only our panelists today use their video while they're presenting. And then if you want to ask questions during the question and answer time, feel free to turn off your video or turn on your video. But if everyone could please mute yourselves. Feel free to use the chat box throughout, again, to introduce yourself. If we have any alums here, please share when you graduated. And definitely feel free to put questions in the chat box. We'll be using it to share some additional links and information too. For questions, like I said, you can put those in the chat box, and my colleague, Crystal Stanley, will be monitoring the chat throughout this panel. So she can either ask the question on your behalf, or if you would rather ask the question, you can raise your virtual hand or raise the Zoom hand and wait to be called on, and then you can ask your question if you like. We are recording the panel, so you can watch it again or share it with friends who were unable to attend. And this recording, along with our previous panel recordings, can be found at drake.edu/career/events. Now, it's universally understood that volunteerism is good and a needed part of social change. But often we forget there are many amazing career opportunities that spur social change. The Careers in Social Change series focuses on those careers. Tonight, our focus is on community engaged learning and research. In just a moment here, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about their career and background, and what drew them to a career working in community engaged learning and research. So tonight we will start with Lindy, and then I'll ask Justin to share, and then Renee. Let's go ahead and start with Lindy.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. I guess when your last name starts with B, you're kind of always the first to go, right? But thanks for having me. I asked them to show this slide because I like to show this slide whenever I'm presenting the first time to a class or to a group of students, because I'm a visual learner myself, and I think it does a good job of sharing my story and really how I got to where I am today, because it's really a winding and odd path. So I'm an Iowa native. I grew up in Northeast Iowa in Waverly, Iowa. I always think it's important to share kind of my grandparents and parents' background too, because it speaks to why I do what I do today. My grandparents, my father's parents were both teachers, high school teachers. And then my mom grew up on a farm, and her dad was a farmer and her mom was a nurse. Both my parents kind of went a different route, and actually I saw someone who's in actuarial science here. My dad is an actuary, and my mom was a computer engineer at an insurance company. But they always, I think, really took the values of their grandparents, so coming from more of a kind of the social sciences background, to inform a lot of what they encouraged me and my siblings to do with our careers. They really encouraged us to explore how to engage more in the social sciences, which led me really to my undergraduate degree, which is at St. Olaf College. It's in Northfield, Minnesota. It's a small private liberal arts college. Similar to Drake, it doesn't have graduate programs, but being a liberal arts college, I had the opportunity to explore a lot of different things. Maybe too many, because I had about 5 different majors at St. Olaf until I figured out what I kind of wanted to do. And I say kind of because I went a little bit different of a way after I graduated from St. Olaf, but I got a degree in biomedical studies and exercise science. But it was during my senior year there, during a capstone class that I was taking, that I figured out what I was really interested in was nutrition and healthy eating. And so with that, I decided to go back to become a registered dietitian, which requires certain classes, certain accreditation. So I came back to Iowa and went to Iowa State University, did that coursework here in Iowa. And then to become a dietitian, you also have to do a residency. And I ended up doing my residency. I included the picture of the bean here because I did my residency in Chicago, but it was on the south side of Chicago. So it was a really eye-opening experience for a girl who grew up in a small town in Iowa, went to a private liberal arts college in a small town in Minnesota, and then moved to the south side of Chicago where I lived and worked. And it was just a really eye-opening experience for me, seeing, first of all, interacting with patients that lived there and understanding their difficulties and barriers to healthy eating, and how it wasn't just a choice that they could make, but there was a lot of other determinants to their ability to be healthy. And then also living there on the south side of Chicago, I experienced a lot of those barriers myself. And so after I was done with my residency in Chicago, I was fortunate enough to be invited back to Iowa State, or I received a fellowship to go back to Iowa State and get my PhD in nutrition. And that's, I guess, if I'm going to offer any advice, one of the pieces of advice I would offer is to stay in touch or stay in good contact with the professors or leaders that you meet during your college career. Because it was because I was close with a college professor and she said, hey, there's this great opportunity to come back and get paid to get your PhD. I was like, yeah, that sounds great. I'm interested in research and figuring out how to be an even better version of what I'm doing already. So I came back to Iowa State and I got my PhD there as well. But it was all during this time, and I include pictures of myself in front of the federal Capitol and at the Iowa State Capitol. It was during that time that I became very engaged and involved in policy work through my professional organization, the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, and really realized that the solutions to some of those changes or some of those barriers that I was witnessing when I worked in the South Side of Chicago were going to come through policy, not through me counseling individual patients. And so that led me, that interest in policy from a professional level, and then my interest in research after getting my PhD led me to the Harkin Institute, where I'm able to combine those two things and do research on policy. And part of that research on policy is really engaging with the community and community partners to be able to create and inform people on what effective policy looks like. So I'll end it there and pass it off to Justin.
Thanks, Lindy. As a native of Minnesota, glad to see that you went to St. Olaf. I have maybe perhaps an opposite story though, because I went to Luther College in Decorah, Iowa, close neighbor to Waverly. So I grew up in Stillwater, Minnesota, a suburb of the Twin Cities area, and I got my undergraduate degree from Luther College in Decorah, Iowa. I studied sociology, and it took me a while to find that particular degree as well. And while I was at Luther, I spent a lot of time, kind of involved in the collegiate experience, but I didn't spend a lot of time doing volunteerism or service projects. It was something that I just had never really occurred to me as something that I should take advantage of. And it is something that I would encourage all of you to really dive into, because it wasn't until my master's degree when I really saw the benefits of community engagement. I took a break between my bachelor's and master's degree, and I went out to Indianapolis in Indiana to get my master's degree out there. And I happened to start a graduate assistantship in their Center for Service and Learning. And I was just completely blown away at it. I was in my master's program. I also had this great opportunity to support or to be a part of service learning courses. And then as a graduate assistant, I was kind of a pseudo staff position of being an administrator of a service learning type of program. And it was everything that I needed right at the right moment, because it gave me such a grounding and such an important understanding as to why connecting with the community and using your degree to be able to support your community with that knowledge is so vital. So I think the true benefit for me on the student side of things was, as a student, I was able to see, one, that I had such a rich understanding of what was happening in Indianapolis as a result of all the volunteerism that I was doing and all the organizations and nonprofits that I was working with. And then as a graduate assistant, as kind of a staff person, I was also able to see my classmates experiencing the same thing, and we were all benefiting and learning even more than what we had, could have possibly even imagined as a result of these really unique experiences. And then finally, from the supporting faculty and what the institution wanted to do was their commitment to the community. The school I went to, IUPUI, is dedicated to the neighborhood, the West Side neighborhood in Indianapolis. And being able to see that in the faculty who, some were from those neighborhoods, some of the students were from that neighborhoods, and some were not, but they were all just dedicated to the success of this neighborhood, was really inspiring. And just, it was kind of this perfect storm of bringing everything together. And so that's brought me to where I am today, which is a little organization called Campus Compact. We're a small nonprofit. I work for Iowa and Minnesota Campus Compact, which is a chapter across Iowa and Minnesota. There's a national Campus Compact out of Boston, Massachusetts. But our whole focus is supporting campuses like Drake, and other campuses across both states to improve their community engagement, to get students, faculty, staff involved in the community in whatever way that makes sense. So commonly we help out with service learning. We help out a lot of faculty to be able to generate service learning classes. We also help students to get involved in the community, whether it's through AmeriCorps or through other sorts of volunteer opportunities, helping staff like Renee and Amanda to be able to improve their professional selves, to be able to support students in a more meaningful way, or helping out faculty to do that as well. And sometimes we even work with nonprofits directly across both states to be able to understand what's going on in the communities, but also to be able to support them and their ability to partner with higher education. So the whole goal of it is really to ensure that community engagement is happening across both states in a really meaningful way. And I mentioned volunteerism, but it goes across the whole spectrum. Everything from political to advocacy to policy writing to everything in between. And that's what we're excited about. And that's what excites me. That's what brought me to Campus Compact.
Thank you, Justin. Renee.
Hello. Thanks for having me tonight. And Lindy, I did not know you were from Waverly. I spent part of my career at Wartburg College. So I'm Renee Sedlicek-Lee. My pronouns are she and hers. And I got my start as an undergrad student. So I went to a really small school in Pella called Central College. And while I was there, I went on a service trip I want to say my sophomore year, might have been my freshman year, but I think my sophomore year. And it was the first time I had sat face to face with people who were experiencing homelessness and reached out and shook their hand. And from that moment on, my engagement with social issues changed. So I've always had an interest in wanting to do service and be of help to other people. But at that moment, I knew that something was going to be different moving forward. My interest was piqued with how to do this in connection to academics. So my following years, I would take any service learning class at Central that I could as part of my coursework. And a lot of faculty at that time would either offer service learning or a research project, and I always chose service learning. I ended up working in the community-based learning office on my campus, and then was able to actually stay on a year after I graduated, thanks to AmeriCorps, and a position through Iowa Campus Compact, who Justin works with. I was placed at Central in their community-based learning office and worked with nonprofits across the Des Moines area, engaging Central students with those nonprofits. As a result of that AmeriCorps experience in that office, I was literally able to check off every single piece of the job description for a community service associate at Wartburg College in Waverly. So interesting connections to the other two speakers. And I ended up staying at Wartburg for about 7 years and had various titles throughout that time, but left there as the service learning coordinator in 2013. While I was at Wartburg, I did pursue my master's in post-secondary education at the University of Northern Iowa. And that was about 5 years after my undergraduate. So I took a pause and worked and then pursued that. Came to Drake in 2013 and I started as the assistant director and have had various titles here at Drake too. And once the director left, I became interim and now I serve as director of community engaged learning. And my primary role is working alongside faculty and helping them understand how to integrate community-based practices into the course as a strategy for helping students learn more. Of course, the bonus for higher ed is that it also meets community identified needs. So we're doing real work and getting real hands-on experience while also learning whatever educational or discipline specific knowledge there is to learn in that course. While I've been at Drake, I'm pursuing my PhD. I've finished my coursework in a doctoral program in education and have my dissertation finished this dissertation is the only thing I have left to finish and hope to do that within this next year. I'm very interested at this point in time in the continuum of engagement, moving beyond just charity and volunteer service to the idea of social innovation and new solutions for problems, which is hopefully something we're going to start doing more and more at Drake. And of course, there's research components that go along with being able to implement new innovative solutions to problems. So that's a little bit of background about me and what I do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, students, so feel free to put your questions in the chat box or raise your hand. And I'll ask a question just to get us started. So I heard a diversity of educational backgrounds. It doesn't sound like there's, a definitive educational background or career path into a position such as any of yours. Do you think there is a traditional educational background? And if not, are there certain types of courses that students should be looking at taking?
I'll be very biased here and say that no, there is not. I think if you're hoping to do something like what Renee and Amanda does, then there are increasingly opportunities, especially at the graduate level, to get a formal education in that area. But outside of that, I mean, the whole goal of community engagement is that anybody can do it at any time, regardless of what your interests area are and what your academic pursuits are. I mean, as an example, I saw a lot of folks talking about accounting and actuarial sciences and things like that. It all applies. I work for a nonprofit. I guarantee you that there's somebody at any nonprofit who deals with finances and budgets that is in way over their head and doesn't know anything about finances and budgets. That's just the reality of nonprofits. It doesn't mean that you have to work for a nonprofit, but maybe you can support those nonprofits by providing, volunteering and supporting. That's one way to do it. The other way to think about it too is, on the policy side of things, are there policies or laws that exist that are preventing equality and equity from happening in those areas? And that particular lens you can really focus on and do some awareness and advocacy in that area. So whatever your area of interest is, the reality of it is just how are you helping or solving problems? And community engagement is just kind of a blanket term to talk about solving problems.
Yeah, I think Justin said it perfectly. I feel kind of silly even say anything after that. But getting back to the education piece of it, I am, I think, the perfect example of I have a professional degree and I could be practicing as a dietitian in a whatever setting that would be, but I'm in a setting where I do research on nutrition policy. I have no degree in policy at all. I just have a passion for it. And so I've taken that on. And again, I was very fortunate to go to a liberal arts college where I did get a really well-rounded education, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't be good at this job that I'm doing today. So I think having a passion for the work is really important. And, knowing that, as Justin said, just community engagement is about engaging the community in whatever form that takes. And I suppose you could have a great formal education to do that, but if you have the interest and willingness to do it, then I think you're set.
Yeah, and I mean, I mentioned my master's degree is in student affairs, but my undergrad, like Justin, was in sociology. And that primed the pump for how I think about systems and change and all of that. And so if you're not majoring in sociology, there are ways to expose yourself now to those kinds of ways of thinking through some of the things that Justin mentioned, either just volunteering right now. You could obviously help out in our office if that's an interest of you that you want to explore. I've seen a lot of people come to this work through social work as well, and some of the other human services. And I would say this is the advice I got from a mentor one time that I'll never forget. I was mentioning it took me 5 years before I decided to go back to graduate school. And I find myself very fortunate that I got into a position in higher ed with just my BA degree. I'm not sure that that's the environment anymore. I mean, that was over 15 years ago. And anyways, I wanted to get my master's degree, and he said, because it was between social work or something more social justice oriented or the student affairs. And he said, you have the passion. Think about grad school as now the structure, right? If you think about it as a body, the meat and the flesh is your passion. You need a strong skeleton to stand on and to hold all that passion up. And that's what grad school should be. And so I would offer that advice, no matter what your discipline or interest is. If you do pursue graduate programming to go into community engagement, what is it, the skill set that you don't have yet that you can then apply to the community issues that you're trying to solve?
Okay, both Renee and Justin talked about service learning. Can you expand on what is service learning and how can students get involved in that?
Yeah,
Go ahead,
Justin,
Renee.
do you? Okay. Well, at Drake, we define service learning as experiential learning that meets a community identified need and ties service work to the coursework through intentional reflection. There's various definitions. That's the kind of a nutshell of what we do at Drake. And actually, all of the courses that have a service learning component that we are aware of are tagged in Banner. So if you go to the My DUSIS section of the website and look at the attribute, there's a drop-down list. And at Drake, they're tagged as CEL, Community Engaged Learning. When you go to register for courses, you can actually look up and search specifically for courses that have a community engaged learning component. Justin, anything to add?
I'll just kind of hammer home that idea is that the crux of service learning is really, going back to the idea of service and learning. And service is the volunteer, the experience that you're getting, in the community or wherever it's happening. It might be a direct service type of project where you're at a nonprofit, you're shoulder to shoulder doing mentorship. It might not be. You might be you doing a bunch of research, writing a paper, and handing that over to the nonprofit for them to understand the needs that their community has. So the whole service side of it can take a whole bunch of different shapes of it. But then the other side of it is the learning, and this is really the important part: is how are you reflecting upon what you did? Did you just do a project and then walk away from it, or did you get a chance to kind of think about what you did and how it works and adopts itself to the things that you're learning in class? So service and learning, it has to be both. They have to be connected in some way and very intentional.
Thank you very much. That makes a lot of sense. So we do have a question in the chat. What other skills and or training do you feel connect to the careers that you have now? And that was from Leslie. Do you need me to repeat it? Because I wasn't very smooth. Let me repeat that. What other skills or training do you feel connect to the careers you have now?
I unmuted first, so I'll go. Definitely organization, keeping myself organized. We have a lot of balls in the air. This is not a field that you go in, you have one task, and then you leave for the day. It's very project management based. And so that's been a significant skill that I've acquired over time. And so keeping organized helps with that as well. I'll continue to think of more, but that's the number one that comes to my mind.
I can go. I think something that I have found that helps me is not being afraid to reach out to just kind of cold call people, if that makes any sense. Especially for what I do, it's just not being afraid to contact someone and say, hey, how can I help you? Or how can you help me? I think there's a lot of mutual benefit that can come from that. So not necessarily being a good communicator, but not being afraid to reach out to someone to ask how you can benefit each other.
I think the two things that I would add to the list is one is dependability. You know, a lot of community engagement, nobody's really getting paid to do it. You know, I think we're all in this kind of very unique position to be being paid to do it, but a lot of community engagement is volunteer run. It's by passionate folks who see a problem and want to solve it in some way. And so being dependable and really, you know, pursuing the problem and continuing to do it. You know, I see projects all the time that just fall apart because someone is really invested at the beginning, but then towards the middle and towards the end, they just kind of say, I'm not really interested in that anymore. And so if you're really committed, you know, you need to be committed, you know, and figure out what that point is and how far you want to take it. And then if it's starting to feel like it's a grind, you want to figure out how do you transfer it to another part of it. And the second part of it is really listening. I think this is the thing that we have to think about more and more, especially as we think about in the area of equity, is, you know, how are we listening to each other, and really how are we listening to communities? I think a lot of the time the decision makers aren't doing a lot of that. Being more cognizant of that and understanding and just doing a lot more listening, you know, could take you a lot further than what you thought you would be able to.
Thanks, Justin. I want to expand a little bit on your response there. And I think all three of you talked about working with communities. Lindy, what does that look like in your position?
Yeah, I didn't probably do a very good job explaining my position. So as the Associate Director of Wellness Nutrition Policy at the Harkin Institute, which is at Drake University, we're an organization that is really looking to inform good policy. And in my area, wellness and nutrition area. And as I said, something that really kind of formed who I am was getting that personal connection and one-on-one and realizing, oh, you know, I didn't learn all the answers in the classroom, even though I was taught medical nutrition therapy. I wasn't going to go in and tell someone like, if you change eating this way, you're going to be healthy, when they tell back, you know, can say back to me, well, I can't do that because of X, Y, Z. And so in my role is really trying to figure out how to change the XYZs of it all. And so in my role at creating that good policy really takes a lot of outreach and working with organizations that are either already doing something in that vein or working with the people who have those problems. So for example, we're doing kind of a large research project right now on how to help people who are on supplemental nutrition assistance programs, so SNAP benefits, what you might better know as food stamps, how to help people on that food assistance eat healthier. And since I don't work directly with any of those organizations, yet there are a lot of organizations that work with people on food assistance, it takes me reaching out to those organizations to reach out to the people who are actually on food assistance to better understand how to help those people, but then how to help the organizations that are also helping people on food assistance. And then create policies that help everybody kind of down that line. And so I guess I'm kind of getting away from your question here, but it is so important for us to reach out and learn from the people who are doing the work, because I'm not doing the work yet. I'm going to be making recommendations on how to change the work they're doing. So I need to know what kind of recommendations are going to best support the work they're doing, and then in turn going to be the best for the people they're serving.
Great, thank you. Renee, what would you add about working with community, and what would you ask students to keep in mind when working with community, in addition to listening and dependability that Justin talked about?
Yeah. So one thing we try to do at Drake is to make it easier to engage with community partners by identifying needs and identifying who those partners are that might have a relationship with us already. And so our colleague, Ryan Arnold, in the advancement office is responsible for a lot of the strategy building around community development or community engagement. And I think that's an important piece to understand, that the university is really looking to create a strategy around this, so that it's not just going out at our will whenever and trying to work with people. It's identifying strategic projects and strategic issues that we can partner with. And so there's a lot of thought process behind it. We have a website, drake.edu/volunteer, where we try to keep a somewhat active list. Some of the things on there are kind of ongoing opportunities, and then some of them, come on the list and come off. So that's a good place to find options that have already been identified. And then the other piece I would add to what Justin has mentioned about the listening is that the element, not just listening, but the element of empathy. And I don't know how to really say this, but being careful that even with listening and being empathetic, being cognizant of the power and the privilege that we bring to those conversations. And figuring out how do we not only listen so that we can make a decision, but that we really empower the voice of the people being served by the organization and the organization itself, so that they have a stake and a role and ownership in whatever the project is that we're creating. And that takes time, and it takes listening, and it takes cold calling sometimes and networking, but it makes a huge difference in being able to work with people than to work rather than just working for them.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to pause here and ask the students, is there anything you've heard that you need clarification on, or you have additional questions about? It looks like we have, oh, go ahead, Crystal, if you want to share that.
Yep, we do have a question or a comment and a question in the chat from Katie, and that is, Renee, you mentioned social involvement and more non-traditional forms of community engagement. Could you or anyone else talk more about how you've been involved in them? And also, if you could talk to any challenges you've faced in the profession in the pandemic and how you've overcame them, that would be great too.
And that's social innovation. Renee, you talked about that earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I see community engagement on a continuum from what we would consider charitable acts to justice and systems change. And what I mean by that is we have things like volunteering, which happen one point in time on a certain day doing a certain act, and those are very important. So for example, let's take the topic of hunger. People are hungry today, and they need the services of food stamps or pantries or that kind of thing, and that's very important. But if we're not doing work like what Lindy's doing, where we're affecting policy and we're actually changing, why are people hungry in the first place? Is it because they lack affordable housing? Is it because they lack, good wages? Is it they lost their job last month? There's obviously tons of different reasons why people might be experiencing hunger in our community, and we need people addressing those things too. And so I look at it as different levers of change. There's a really good tool that we use, actually comes from Iowa and Minnesota Campus Compact. It's called the Social Change Wheel. And I don't know if Justin or Amanda, if you could put that in the chat box, but this wheel is fantastic at helping you explore all the different strategies. And it's not even probably all the things that you could be doing, but it identifies at least 12 in addition to just volunteering. On that wheel, social innovation is within the sphere of social entrepreneurship. And what we mean by that is using traditional business models to address and affect change in the community. Social enterprise is also here too. So what this means is that there's businesses out there who care more than just about getting a profit. They also care about the environment and about social concerns. And so there's things you could do through the business sector. Social entrepreneurship is also can be a business startup, right? Not the best example, but Tom's Shoes is one that comes to mind, where you buy a pair of shoes, they give a pair of shoes to a community or a person in need. Great. The wheel is on the screen. And what I mean specifically about social innovation is that innovation just means new. And sometimes the ways in which we are doing things, service just perpetuates the way we've been doing it. And so if there's a new way to think about, let's say, eradicating hunger, then social innovation allows us to go explore those possibilities. I am just starting to dip my toe into this world of social innovation. So I personally don't have very specific experience. A lot of my experience has been on more of a either community organizing side or community building. I was part of a couple of different associations when I was actually back in Waverly. So I don't know if Justin or Lindy, if you have any social innovation examples or other examples of how you've been involved.
I would talk about a local example that I think gets close to the definition, maybe not the truest definition of social innovation, but Reagan in Des Moines. So we had at our Civic Action Academy a few years ago, we had Mike Draper, the owner of Reagan, come and talk. And the way that he runs his business, he thinks about it in this way in terms of community involvement and community impact. So he thinks about everything from where are we sourcing our materials to who's making the t-shirts that they have or all the other things. And they're in whatever country in the world, and are they receiving a fair wage from where they are? So turns out that just because countries across the world, t-shirts are cheaper to create there than they are in the United States. Well, that doesn't mean that in that particular country or that particular city that they're paying a fair wage for that particular location. And so he does the work and investigates down to that level. Additionally, he also does it with his employees in his business and looks at providing a workplace that meets their needs. Something like that, I think, works towards that definition. It's not the truest form of social innovation, which I think is a little bit more corporate-y, but something like that, you can see that. To me, social innovation really comes down to connecting a highly ethical business with this kind of business capitalistic model.
Yeah, I would say Reagan is a great example of corporate social responsibility, more than necessarily social innovation. But Lindy, do you have?
Yeah, so a couple come to my mind. Every year, the Harkin Institute puts out a report on different organizations across the United States that are doing really innovative stuff to advance wellness nutrition work. And one of the groups we've highlighted in the past and have actually come to Des Moines to speak is DC Central Kitchen, which they actually call themselves a social enterprise. And they're based out of Washington, DC, but what they do is they're a central kitchen. So it's a food kitchen, or like a place people can go, obviously, for food. But what they've done is create a model where they can actually make their own money back, because part of their model is they bring people in who might be coming to their kitchen for food. They do job training with them, and then they hire them to work in their kitchen. And their kitchen not only serves homeless and people who are food insecure, but it also has contracts with 12 different schools within the Washington, D.C. area. So they actually make food for all those schools. They just opened their own cafe and kitchen. So then people who are trained within that program can go and work within that kitchen. Or hopefully, obviously, the goal is to get those people working within other organizations and making a fair wage. But all of their employees do make a living higher than minimum wage. They all get benefits, all of those wonderful things. And so it's this way of, doing the right thing, but then also meeting their bottom line and essentially, hopefully, making a profit. And they do a lot of not only that kind of work, but they do a lot of advocacy work as well, looking to get more federal funding to support the work they're doing, and other work that really makes it easier for people to have a fair living wage, and then at the same time have a healthy diet.
Great example.
Can I add one more, Amanda?
Sure.
So as you were talking, Lindy, it made me think of locally here, DMARC. So the Des Moines Area Religious Council is the organization that runs all of the food pantries within Des Moines. And here's a great example of social innovation, which is you come in and we package up your food for you and we give it to you. Well, what they didn't realize is that's undermining the empowerment of folks who are in that situation to, grocery shop on their own. And so the other thing that they started to recognize too is, what does healthy food look like in a pantry system? And so they revolutionized the system by creating what's called the My Choice Pantry. And so participants now actually come in, they get to shop themselves. And then they've got different policies and procedures in place in terms of the types of food that now is donated and whatnot, so that the options are healthier. But that's an example of, we've always done food pantry services this one way. Well, what if we flipped the model? What if we changed how we're doing it? So innovation, social innovation, might have a business model or a return or a profit, but it doesn't have to. It can just simply be a new product or service that expands on what we've already been doing, or does it differently and enhances or eliminates the way that we were doing it the old way.
Thank you all for those great examples. I want to highlight the second half of that because I am extremely curious about this as well. Can you talk about any challenges that you've had in the profession due to the pandemic and how you've overcome them? That would be great. And that is again also from Katie.
I'll talk. I think there's kind of the early pandemic, and then there's the late pandemic. As someone, I do a lot of our grant writing and fund development. And early pandemic, we were focused on helping campuses and building up resource centers with campuses. That's one of the things that Campus Compact does. And there was just a flurry of grant opportunities that came out, but they all had like 2-day turnarounds. And if you ever have an experience with grant writing, or even working on an assignment in class, a 2-day turnaround is a big ask. And that was a big challenge for our organization, but also other nonprofits and organizations that I work with and help out with, was just dealing with that level and type of experience. And then I would say as time went on, For our organization, for Campus Compact, I think one of the things that we're really known for is being on a college campus and knowing the communities around Iowa and Minnesota, and we just can't do that right now. We're so accustomed to, we have about 10 people in our office and having almost all of them out traveling somewhere to be able to meet with students and meet with nonprofits and meet with folks out in the community. And it's we can't do that. Now, obviously, we can do that virtually, but it's a little bit different. It's more challenging to support community engagement in these ways because we're having to shift in our understanding and also how we're explaining how community engagement can be done. And I think there's a lot of pause from folks on just doing it in general. In parts, so not everywhere, but that's something that we're just experiencing. How do we fulfill our mission while also seeing that a lot of folks are just wanting to stop and pause in this moment.
Yeah, so we're on a college campus, so it's clearly impacted our work significantly this year. But I think this panel tonight, this format, is an example of how we've pivoted. So you think back a year ago, or almost a year ago in March, and I remember, we had to make significant changes. We were all going to be now working from home. Students, you all were sent home, and we thought for sure we'd be back by this summer. Never thought that the fall would also entail this distance learning and working remotely. And because of technology, we've been able to still, it amazes me. We've still been able to do community engagement and fulfill the how to say, the ethos, the essence is the word I'm looking for, of community engagement, even though it's been in a virtual environment. I have to give props to Amanda and our other colleague, Jaslyn, and then the students in our office who throughout the fall were able to offer a variety of ways to still engage, even if it was virtual. We've done some in-person things, but of course that's been limited. And so now is a great time to do research on the social issue that you are concerned about. Really dig in and understand what are the issues surrounding it. Get to know an organization. The other thing is they're pivoting just as fast as we are in figuring these things out. And so their traditional volunteer needs aren't the same. And so the capacity type of work that you could offer in terms of the research or going in, offering a skill set, maybe it's just managing their social media and helping them keep up to date on that. These are all the kinds of ways in which we've seen students engage and continue to engage despite the challenges we have of being distant, I guess. One plug I will give is for April 5th through 10th, we are going to be offering a week of civic action. And you can find more out on drake.edu/volunteer is where we'll be promoting that. But it's exactly to this point, is that there's gonna be lots of different in-person as well as socially distanced and safe ways to continue to engage and different pathways to being civically engaged. Even though we're having lots of challenges with distance.
I don't know if I have anything more to add, but just that COVID has obviously changed everything with a lot of the organizations that I work with on the food insecurity hunger front. But in a lot of ways, COVID shown this new spotlight on the food insecurities that we have in the United States. And so not only have the organizations pivoted, but they've also, I think, received a little bit more of this groundswelling of support from people who might not have otherwise been interested before. So as much as I hate COVID, it has also been this opportunity to really kind of uncover a lot of these disparities that we are seeing.
As we start to near the end of our panel today, do the three of you know of any specific opportunities that students could get involved in now or in the near future? I recently heard about some opportunities with Harkin. We have some opportunities in our office, and there's always AmeriCorps opportunities. So how can students get involved with this type of work, community engaged learning and research now?
Well, I could start since you mentioned the Harkin Institute. So the Harkin Institute, we also hire students, Drake students, to work for us and help us do research and all of our project work. Wellness nutrition is not our only focus area. So if you're not interested in that, I'm not offended, and you don't have to work on my projects. But we also focus on disability policy, retirement security, and then employment as well. So if you're interested in kind of any of those areas, come work for us. We work on a variety of different things. And so we're hiring right now. So if you want to come work for us, I'm hiring specifically for a position to help with the SNAP work that I talked about. So if anyone's interested in that, that's a way for you to get engaged here at the Harkin Institute.
Yeah, for our Minnesota Campus Compact, we are in the process of starting to recruit for our AmeriCorps Vista positions. AmeriCorps Vista is a year of service. This program happens across Iowa and Minnesota. You'd have an opportunity to serve at a nonprofit or at a college or university campus, doing a whole variety of different things, typically behind the scenes kind of indirect capacity building projects. And we'll start releasing those probably here in the next couple of weeks or so. But if you're ever interested in AmeriCorps, I think the best place to look is my.americorps.gov. That's the kind of the portal or the application portal, and that's where we'll be posting all of our positions. But Vistas in particular, there's Vista positions across the entire United States. One of the things I really like about it is if you're interested in going to another city across the United States, that they do provide a travel stipend to help you move and to get on your feet when you get there, which is always a nice sort of opportunity. But then there's also ones that are probably in your backyard or in wherever you grew up. There's enough AmeriCorps positions across definitely both states that you can find something that you'd be interested in.
In addition to the resources I mentioned, I'll plug the Pathways, which is what this panel is connected to, and Amanda did a nice job of doing a primer at the beginning. But the Pathways for Civic Action and Social Change is this framework we're using at Drake now to help students identify a place to start. Doesn't mean you're going to be on a single path your whole life, or even Drake. And so if you go to, maybe we'll put this in the chat as well, but go to drake.edu/CEL, which is our website, and click Student Opportunities and then click Pathways, you can find out specific information. There's a quick survey you can take, and what we encourage you to do is to take that survey and then meet with one of our community engagement peers who can then walk through that results with you and connect you to organizations that are actively doing community engagement right now, whether it be in person or virtual. So I'm going to toss it back to Amanda in case you have anything you want to add about Pathways or other opportunities in our office.
We do hire students, as Renee was talking about, the community engagement peers who do the one-on-one meetings, and they also each kind of run their own program. We have the Sprout Garden here on campus. We do food recovery. We have a student who coordinates the IRIS program, reading the news for the blind and print handicap. So there are different paid positions out of our office that will be opening up fairly soon. And if you just check our website for that, you can also follow us on social media at Drake Service. We post a lot of our opportunities and events there. And then we will also be having 2 more panels this spring, and Crystal is sharing this on the screen now. So this, again, if you want to take the assessment survey and do a one-on-one appointment, definitely feel free to reach out to me. And then if you want to go to the next slide, Crystal, we have our national service programs panel. So a lot of what Justin was talking about, we want to hear from some of those AmeriCorps members and people who are in the program or who have done a year of service, or how people can get involved in that. And then April 6th, another piece of Pathways is direct service. So more of that, tutoring and serving meals and organizing donations, things like that, that we might consider more that direct service. We'll be having a panel during Civic Action Week on April 6th. Both of those are from 4 to 5, and you can sign up the same way on Handshake, and please tell your friends too. So we're excited to help students realize more and more that there's just so many different career paths and careers in order to create social change. Well, I would like to give a huge thank you to our 3 panelists. I have learned so much. I hope you all have as well. If anybody has continued questions after this, feel free to reach out. We can help get those answered. Otherwise, does anybody else have anything to add before we head out?
No, just thank you. And please do feel free to follow up with any of us if you have additional questions or things you want to chat about.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.